Call to order this meeting of the Morrisville Planning and Zoning Board. And ask Arlene to give us an invocation.
Let us pray. Father in heaven, we do come before you, and we want to thank you for another day of life and always asking for your hand in it. We do thank you that we live in America and pray very much that you'll guide and help us at the issues and problems that we do face. We pray for our first responders, our Army and Armed Services, Father, that are out there protecting us at all times. And we do pray that you will help us do our best for our town, for Morrisville. Praise and blessing to you. Amen.
Thank you, Harleen. So this evening, Vinnie Gull is not able to be with us. So I'm going to ask Rex to be the voting member this evening.
Okay, thank you.
And acknowledge that this may be your last meeting for a while at least.
Yeah, that's what I heard. It was my last attendance. Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate serving.
Very good. And I'd like to note that Rob Taylor is in the audience tonight. Welcome, Rob. We'll see you on this side of the fence next month. So, any changes to the agenda from your side, Courtney?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I'd like a motion to adopt the agenda.
I make a motion to adopt the agenda.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
We'll move forward with the agenda. Have you all had a chance to review the minutes from July? Any changes or omissions? Seeing none, can we get a motion to approve the minutes?
I move the minutes of the previous meeting be adopted.
Have a second for that?
I'll second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
The minutes from July are adopted. Thank you. So a nice short agenda tonight, but starring Ben Howell.
Good evening.
And your presentations on Tuesday were just a warm-up for tonight, right?
Tuesday and yesterday.
Okay.
All right. So I know the board has asked for a little bit more of a comprehensive update on transportation. So that's what I will give you tonight. Give an overview of Morrisville projects that are funded in the latest state transportation improvement program. I'll also give an overview of some of our town-funded transportation projects. Even though this board is well aware of the town's comprehensive transportation plan, I'll remind you of where we are on that one, as well as a quick update on the Wake Transit Plan implementation. So it's always good to start off with some pictures and graphics. So I figured and found some fun ones that are that over the next 10 years may be well applicable to our area. So
a lot of ECU pirates like doing the road work.
That's because it's getting close to football season.
There you go.
So the timeline for the STIP, there was the initial draft of the 2018 to 2027 State Transportation Improvement Program, or STIP, was released in January for public comment. NCDOT then released their final draft in May 27 based off of, with any changes that were made due to that public comment, with the original goal of having it approved by the Board of Transportation in June. The Board of Transportation did not adopt that STIP in June. Instead, NCDOT between May and June revised some revenue projections and told the board that they were actually going to come out with a revised STIP with some based on some new revenue projections, as well as looking better at their bank accounts and looking at trying to accelerate some projects. So They did release a revised draft in June that was later adopted by the Board of Transportation just last week. And in the now adopted STIP, there's a lot of project schedules have been accelerated. Some project budgets have been approved, have been revised, and then they've also have been able to add in 144 new projects. So all in all, it was a very good revision, especially for us. With that said, this is probably one of my favorite slides. In the May draft STIP, we had a DOT investment of roughly $204 million. We're now up to $243 million DOT investment just for Morrisville. As long as you consider the two interchange projects on I-40 in Morrisville, which even though Aviation Parkway isn't technically in Morrisville, it affects us, so I included it. And just for comparison purposes, the previous STIP that was the 2016 to 2025 that we just got out of, in that one we had about $100 to $150 million DOT investment. So DOT's investment in Morrisville continues to go up, which is good news because we're getting more and more projects completed or funded. So moving forward, some of the projects that are in the STIP for state-funded roadway projects, we have the two interchanges out on I-40, one at Aviation Parkway, one at Airport Boulevard. Both of those are funded, they've gotten their budgets increased, and also the schedules accelerated. So Aviation Parkway is actually funded for construction this year, so we should see that work starting within the next hopefully 6 to 8 months. Airport Boulevard construction is funded for next fiscal year, so that should be fairly quickly behind the Aviation Parkway construction. Both those projects, while not only working on the interchanges, they'll also add auxiliary lanes on I-40 between Aviation and Airport Boulevard, which means if you're just going from Aviation to Airport, you wouldn't have to get into the mainline traffic of I-40. You actually have a complete lane all the way between the two interchanges on both directions. Both of those projects are pretty much complete reconstructions. Aviation Parkway, they're replacing the bridge and are adding a new, what they call a quadrant loop. So if you're heading westbound on I-40 from Raleigh towards RTP and you want to get off at Aviation Parkway, instead of coming up and taking a left at the top of the ramp, you would now go underneath the bridge and come back, circle around, and end up turning right onto Aviation Parkway, so you wouldn't have to stop anymore at a stoplight to turn left. Airport Boulevard interchange.
Are they still going to eliminate the free flow onto Aviation heading towards the airport?
I have not heard that. I'm not aware that that will be done, and that existing ramp now will only go to the airport.
When I talked to the guys, I think they had a thing here a couple of years ago. They were saying they were going to basically have a stoplight there at all times with no flow into the road anymore, but
that I'm not aware of. The Airport Boulevard interchange project is also a complete reconstruction. That one will be a little bit more change. They're looking at a couple options. I have not heard if they've chosen the final option, but it'll it'll either add more loops, more quadrant loops in, so to try and remove some of those traffic signals, or they may do what's called a diverging diamond interchange, which I'm sure Craig knows what that is. But essentially, if you're on Airport Boulevard going to the airport, you would actually end up going from in America, the right side of the road. Those lanes will actually switch over to the left side of the road, so you never have to stop to get onto the interstate. You end up making a free flow movement onto the interstate no matter which way you're going. It's a little strange to picture, but when they're in operation, they actually make a lot of sense and they work very well. I know there's one or two over in the Charlotte area. There's also been one put down if you go down to the beach towards Leland. There's one put down in Leland on Highway 17. More to come on that. Also funded is NC 54 widening from Perimeter Park Drive north to NC 540. That project schedule has been accelerated and is fully committed now. In the previous STIP, only the right-of-way and utility construction were funded. in the what they call the 5-year developmental program. Now construction is funded in that 5-year developmental program. And so as you can see, construction on that could start as soon as 2020. And it's about a 2 to 3 year construction timeline. McCrimmon Parkway widening, which is the section from Davis Drive to NC 54, that is now funded and fully committed. In the previous drafts, only a portion of that was only partially funded, and it was funded in year 8 or 9, and then the half of it was unfunded. Now it's fully funded, and it's been accelerated to match the McCrimmon Parkway grade separation project. So all of McCrimmon should be fixed and 4-laned and have the grade separation in place by around 2023, which is a huge improvement. And that's, as you can see, is $37 million worth of work alone just on that McCrimmon corridor, not counting the other $26 million that is being done on the extension of it. So all told, when everything's complete, we'll have almost a $60 million new corridor from Davis Drive all the way over to Aviation Parkway, which will be exciting and should hopefully really help some congestion issues in town. Aviation Parkway widening, no changes from the earlier draft, but from the current STIP, that project budget has been increased a little bit, but the construction is still timed for between 2022 and 2025 as around a 2 to 3 year construction time frame. Lewis Stevens Drive, that project was accelerated, so construction can begin as soon as next year. And then NC 147, Triangle Parkway Extension, that project has been accelerated so that it is now committed and not subject to reprioritization. The project funding was increased, and the construction now is scheduled for that as early as 2022.
Ben, could we pause there? Maybe anybody have any questions on any of these? Okay, then we'll move on. Very good.
All right, and a good point was made yesterday when I presented at the Developers Council about this. As you can see, between 2022 and 2023, we are going to have a lot of road work going on in town. So there will be barrels everywhere. There will be lots of lane shifts and whatnot, and possible lane closures. But once it's all done, it'll be much, much better. So just have your patience ready by 2020. And then some other road projects, McCrimmon Parkway Extension, and I'll talk about this a little bit more in a minute too, but from the DOT side, the DOT funding has been accelerated to for this fiscal year through next fiscal year. Previously, that funding was pushed out a little bit. That has never been a question for us. DOT has always said that they would they would fund the construction whenever they needed to. But this just puts it in writing now that they can start construction at any time. They also decreased the project costs on the NCDOT side to remove the town funding that we had previously agreed to. The town's funding the engineering and the right-of-way acquisition for that. Long ago, DOT had funding to that, and then they had switched it over to the local funding, and now they just removed it altogether and only show the construction funding, which is what DOT is funding, and that's at $11.8 million. Morrisville Carpenter Road project that we are receiving LAP funding for, that has been officially added into the STIP for construction funding this year. It's a total of $9 million project funding of that. Town funds are $2,325,000. We have state DOT resurfacing funds of $375,000 and federal funds of $6.3 million. When we originally submitted the application and got approval, it was going to be a $2.7 million town funding and $6.3 million federal. In working with DOT, we have been able to get them they were planning to resurface Morrisville Carpenter Road in the near future. So in working with DOT, staff was able to get DOT to agree to give us that money since we're going to be doing the road project, and that lowered our town match by $375,000. So we were very lucky in that. One other thing we've also been able to do is get DOT and Campo to agree to allow us to use some of those funds for right-of-way acquisition if we need to. Town previously budgeted funding, and we expected that the town would be all right-of-way acquisition would be only town funds. We're now going to be able to get some of those federal funds to help us pay for right-of-way acquisition as well. Again, continuing to try and lower the amount of town funds that are dedicated to that project. And then finally, we have what they call an intelligent transportation system / signal system that is in the STIP. That will do several things. The biggest is take our signals now that are not currently on Cary's signal system, which are most of the ones in the north side of town, from about McCrimmon north on 54. Those are most of the signals that are not on their system, and it will pull them. Hopefully, we'll pull those onto Cary's system. We still have a lot of discussions to be had with DOT and Cary, but essentially, with this project, all of our signals will be on a system and will be coordinated, whether that's through Cary or whether that's through a DOT system or our own system, remains to be seen. But that'll help us be able to better manage our traffic signal system in town. We may also be able to do some intersection cameras to monitor traffic and some other things that are considered under that ITS umbrella. That project is around $837,000. Depending on some choices we make, there may be some minimal town funding required for the project, and that project is scheduled for construction or implementation starting next fiscal year, beginning in July.
I got a quick question. So when is the Morrisville Carpenter widening going to start?
I have a whole other slide on that, but hopefully next year. We also have some sidewalk projects in the STIP. These require a 20% town match. It's 80% federal funding that comes directly to DOT. In the past, DOT would cover that 20% required match on their own. A change in their policy a few years ago, they now require the local governments to fund that 20% match. So these projects will require a 20% town match. Airport Boulevard is the first one up, and we actually will be taking a local agreement to town council in the next month or two on that, so we can get started working on that, because that one is funded for construction starting in 2019. That's a $325,000 project that'll add 8-foot wide sidewalks between McCrimmon Parkway and Factory Shops Road, which will help implement our transportation plan that we currently have and that we're working on. We also have a Church Street sidewalk, which is essentially filling in the gaps on Church Street between Morrisville, Carpenter Road, and Durham County line. It is a larger project because of all the gaps at $2 million. That construction is scheduled for 2021 to 2022. So we'll probably get started designing that project in another year or two. And that'll add, hopefully, the goal would be to add sidewalks on both sides of Church Street between Morrisville, Carpenter Road, and McCrimmon, and then both sides of Church Street for some distance north of McCrimmon. And then as the railroad encroaches further north, as it gets closer to Church Street, we'll just have the sidewalk on the one side of Church Street continuing up to the county line. And again, that'll be done in 2021, 2022. We have two others that are shown on the screen, McCrimmon Parkway and Morrisville Carpenter Road. Those are currently in the STIP. Both of those are likely to drop out, or we won't actually utilize those funds, because those sidewalks will be done with the road projects, Morrisville Carpenter Road and the McCrimmon widening. So while unfortunately we won't get to take credit for those, we won't get that funding to use for those projects, at least we know if for some reason the road projects are delayed, we always do have the sidewalk funding if we need it. We also have some town-funded projects, both of which have state and one of them has federal funds, but one's McCrimmon Parkway Extension. Again, 2 phases. NCDOT is contributing funding for phase 2. Total project cost is now $26.17 million. If you remember, originally that was going to be a $14.3 million project, and we were going to build half the road. We've now been able to work with DOT and turn it into a $26 million project to build the road fully out. And again, but with town share still staying at that $14.3 million that was authorized in the 2012 bonds. Phase 1's under construction. We hope to have that completed next year. hopefully earlier next year rather than later. That's extending McCrimmon Parkway from 54 over to Airport Boulevard, including widening McCrimmon Parkway over the railroad tracks. One note on that, unless you haven't been paying much attention, we've been pushing out pretty heavily that there's a closure that's coming up. So in order to widen the road across the railroad tracks, we have to completely close the road at the railroad tracks in order to allow our contractor and the railroad contractor to safely complete the work. At this time, we're expecting a 2 to 3 week closure. Hopefully will be less. We're praying that it won't be more. But that could occur as soon as August 21st, although it's looking like that date's going to slide back a little bit. But we're trying to prepare everyone. We're going to have electronic message board signs out notifying the traveling public of the closure once we know a definitive date. And as you've seen, we've had it in the newsletter. We have our website updated. We've been pushing it out on social media. So please tell everyone you know that drives in Morrisville, remind them that come mid to late August, they need to try to avoid that area if at all possible. We will have a detour in effect that'll take you down 54 to Morrisville Carpenter Road over to Davis and back up to McCrimmon. We are also working with the police department to try and have some officers out at some of the major intersections to try and help keep vehicles moving through the intersections. Also, we'll be talking to Carrie to see what they can do to help us as far as managing the traffic signals. We've been in close conversations with DOT as well, so it's going to be a little painful for a while, but it'll be much better once it's complete. And one note on that detour, just so y'all are aware, and the information again has been pushed out, but at Morrisville Carpenter Road and Church Street, we're going to close off Church Street right there at Morrisville Carpenter Road to try and keep traffic moving more freely around there and avoid having cars trying to turn left off of or onto Church Street. So any cars that do come down Church Street will have to take Jeremiah or Downing Glen over to Town Hall Drive and come down that way. And we will actually have signs up at the north end of Church Street trying to encourage only local traffic to travel down Church Street to reduce the amount that'll be using the neighborhoods. And then, of course, Phase 2 construction's expected to start sometime next year, be about a year-long construction period, and that extends McCrimmon from airport to aviation. With that, are there any questions about McCrimmon before I move along?
I just add, Benjamin, I got my notification about the closure through the homeowners association in Preston that I live in, and whoever's your communications, whoever's working that seems to be a good way to do it, and maybe even follow up to see that they're distributing to their members and that kind of thing.
Okay. Yeah,
that's good.
It's been out there in a lot of different ways.
Stephanie, our PIO, and I know Sarah Baker, our community relations liaison, have been working really hard to try and get that out on as many channels as possible, using all the social media channels that we can, including Nextdoor, which I know is one of the ways we use a lot to get to neighborhoods.
Right.
As well as if you live in close proximity to McCrimmon, we're also going to be sending out postcards. I believe we're going about a half-mile buffer around the McCrimmon closure. So there will be some residents that will receive a postcard directly notifying them of the closure.
One other question. This is for the town manager probably, but any chance of having off-duty police in the area to help keeping irate motorists from? Well,
we will have police, mostly off-duty, but there may be some instances where some of our on-duty police officers, as they can, will help out. But the police are working to have officers at a minimum at the major intersections.
Right. It's a good idea. It's always a good
to
idea.
try and, if worst case, counteract the signals if they have to, but at least try and keep traffic moving through. And we're still working through some of those plans with police and Cary as well to see if we can maybe even utilize some of the Cary police officers.
Okay.
I just have one question. Considering Morrisville north of Church Street, I know for the last week we had to deal with Hobson Road being closed. Will any construction be going on in Hobson and Miami and in that area at the time this is going on as well? Are you aware of anything that's happening?
Yeah, and that actually popped up, that concern popped up on Facebook as well when we had posted about the closure on Facebook. We were not aware that Hobson Road was closed. I reached out to NCDOT. They don't know why it was closed. So as best we can figure, it was a local Durham project. DOT is not aware of any other planned closures. So we are looking at that. I believe we're continuing to try and chase that down to make sure that there's not going to be any counteracting closures at the same time. Unfortunately, with Hobson Road not being in Morrisville, it probably is going to be a little bit harder for us to, if there is a closure planned, it would be more difficult for us to say, to ask not to do it, but we certainly will if there is. But at this time, we're not aware of any other planned closures.
Okay, thank you.
Ben, I think the expression was it could start as early as August the 21st.
Yes.
Do we know what that really means?
Well, we use that wording, and you'll see that wording used a lot more because, as with construction, there are no guarantees, especially when it comes to roadway construction, and especially when it comes to railroad construction. So our contractor had informed us a couple months ago that on their schedule that time they were planning to be there on August 21st. It's looking less and less likely that they will be there on the 21st now, but we figured better to be on the safe side and tell the public it could start as soon as this time. Unfortunately, there's not a good way to say it could start August 21st. It could start September 15th. We don't know. So we say as early as, and again, we'll be, as the date gets more definitive, we'll do another heavy push to try and get wording out. As best we know, it's not going to get pushed back that much. So at this point, we don't expect it to be pushed back more than maybe another week or so.
Okay. Thank you.
If it all of a sudden is going to be pushed back 4 or 6 weeks, we'll have to probably go through the push a little bit more again. But as of right now, we think it'll still be within a few days of that August 21st date.
And a more general comment, it was always the given that working with the railroad, you could get one more lane if you closed 2 other lanes within your jurisdiction. So kudos to whoever it was who managed to get some rational thinking, and you actually get an extra lane across McCrimmon. So
this is just payback for the lanes they stole over at, that I've said about 100 times, and no one's ever this question on Morrisville Parkway. They closed 4 lanes across the tracks. Well, we should get 2 somewhere.
Yeah.
But anyway.
And we worked very hard. It was a coordinated effort by a lot of us. I know Tony Chiatakis,
right,
who was our assistant town manager, he had worked hard on it, but we had to work hard to get the railroad to agree, and the only way we ultimately were able to get them to agree is that we told them, well, you'll get a grade separation there soon, shortly thereafter. Luckily, DOT followed up by funding the grade separation, so they didn't make liars out of us. And so that was the primary thing, is the railroad did realize that this would be a relatively short-term improvement, that a grade separation was coming. The one agreement we did make was that we would not do any further widening to McCrimmon Parkway until that grade separation was put in place.
very good. Great job.
So are they going to eliminate right turns on red at that intersection?
That I don't know. I'm not aware of.
Good. I mean, what happens is, I apologize, but the danger is getting trapped in the crossing with the gates. And when you do a right turn on red, and the traffic's queued up like it is back here, and you get trapped between the gates, there's no place to go, and you'll get hit. And people, don't think.
Yeah,
So it's not a good practice.
My guess is
That's going to really hurt flow.
My guess is that you probably won't be able to turn right, because I know we're having to completely replace all the railroad crossing gates. We're adding additional gates to try and make it safer. That was one thing that the railroad really pushed, was if you're going to widen it, you have to add more gates and make it similar to the Morrisville Carpenter one out here. It won't have all the little islands, but it'll have one island in the middle with additional gates. So my guess is that you will see a no turn on red sign pop up there. I'm not familiar enough with the traffic operations plan to know if that is definitive, but there will also be a dedicated right turn lane, which will help things as well. And then, of course, the other big road project that the town's funding is Morrisville Carpenter Road widening. As I mentioned, we had applied for and received funding through Campo last year for this. Total project cost right now is estimated to be between $10 and $11 million. I think that probably will be more closer to the $10 million level. But that total project cost includes the engineering work we've been doing, as well as if the town did have to fund right-of-way acquisition all on our own, it would be closer to that $11 million. So again, as a reminder, $6.3 million in federal funds, $375,000 in DOT funds, and town funds will be somewhere between that $3.5 to $4 million level, most likely. That project will widen Morrisville Carpenter Road to a 4-lane median divided facility from Davis Drive to the railroad corridor. We're going to begin right-of-way acquisition this fall. And as of right now, our plan is to begin construction hopefully spring of next year, depending on how right-of-way acquisition goes. But we're comfortable that we're pretty confident that we can get construction going next year. And it'll be more than likely a 12 to 18 month construction window because there are some difficulties that we'll have to deal with through there. And we're not planning to do any closures. So everything will be done under traffic. So that elongates the construction period a little bit, but that's a better option. So again, we'll all need some patience driving down that road during the construction. But once it's complete, it'll be a really nice facility. Any questions on that one?
Yeah, the TOD, this is probably a one-off question, but the TOD that's in our plan for that adjacent property, maybe it's a Courtney question, but anyway, it seems to me we want to make sure and coordinate everything we do if we're still committed to TOD in that area. And so any turns or roadway widening or that kind of thing, I know you guys want to get out of there by 3 weeks so you can open the road back up. But on the other hand, make sure I just don't have to do it again if we ever do get to a TOD project.
Yeah, with the McCrimmon TOD.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I backed up one on you. I'm sorry.
That's okay. With that, the goal, of course, is that the grade separation would be open before much of the TOD would be open. As of right now, that's looking fairly likely. We haven't had a whole lot of movement on the TOD. So one of the things we will be doing with our land use plan update that was funded this year, that's one of the areas we're going to take a look at again on the land use side. So you may see some changes to that, to what we have planned for that area. But at this point, we are still planning that as our TOD area, and that has still been that's still being shown as a commuter rail stop. So, but certainly we will keep an eye on that and make sure that any road improvements will support that.
Yeah, it's a big challenge, and people want to invest in TOD, and the whole infrastructure plan is gone. The air is out of the balloon right now. They spent last month on infrastructure improvements than they have in a year and a half, and they're just dysfunctional in Washington, and 2/3 of our dollars come from Washington somewhere or another. So,
I'll add one more thing: is when the 2009 transportation plan was adopted, there was a lot of thought went into the McCrimmon overpass and how it was laid out. So Sheets was designed around, and the McCrimmon extension that you see, that little stub out there that we're building connecting to, was all based off the plans
Right.
that were adopted in 2009. With the TOD plan itself for the McCrimmon intersection, it was also developed using a lot of that same information, and the actual, what most likely be kind of the on ramp, goes through the worst part of the site, which is the brownfield portion.
Yeah.
And then to develop the TOD, it's currently in IM, which is the current use out there. So if anybody wants to develop TOD and wants to do anything different than what was adopted as part of the plan, they have to come back and modify the layout. So, sometimes we have great planning, sometimes not so great planning. I think this is one of those examples of great planning, where we put a lot of thought and energy. So as the puzzle pieces start to fit, while they're not going to fit perfectly all the time, I think we did our job in this instance as kind of a collective, not only just the department, but as well as the elected body and the appointed boards that participated in this process.
That's good. I appreciate that.
And to follow up on that, one of the smartest things I think that the town did with the transportation plans especially was for that area to put as much work as they did into looking at the grade separation and how that alignment, because now if a development does come in for the TOD, we can require them to reserve the right to dedicate the right of way of where that grade separation would be, which is not following the existing alignment of McCrimmon. So that's another thing that'll really help us there.
Right. Thank you.
All right. So finally, we also have some sidewalk projects that are more along the town funding side, although a lot of these do not have all town funding. One that was just recently completed is the Church Street sidewalk from Traybrook Drive up to Cedar Fork Elementary School, or the back side of the school there. That one was approximately a 40-60 split between town funding and community development block grant funds that came to us through Wake County. There's a couple punch list items left on that project, but it's pretty much substantially complete, and it's a really nice sidewalk. If you haven't been up there, we put in curb and gutter along with sidewalk, as well as a new high visibility crosswalk across Church Street there for the apartments on the far side of Church Street. So really pleased with how that sidewalk came out. We also have another Church Street sidewalk project that is just now getting under construction. That's the one from Morrisville, Carpenter Road, Jeremiah Street. That's another Campo project. It's an old Campo funded project, actually. That was the first thing I did when I got here. In the first month, I applied for the funding for that project. So it's the funding. We've had the funding since 2013, and we're happy to finally get it under construction. So that's about a 30% town, 70% federal funding split, and we're expecting construction to be completed later this fall. One note on that project, and you'll see more information coming out in relation to the McCrimmon closure as well. That project's also going to require some lane closures on Church Street because we are adding some curb and gutter on the section of Church Street between Morrisville, Carpenter Road, and the Baptist Church. And so our contractor will have to get in the road. So we will have some lane closures associated with that. The good news is that it sounds like some of those lane closures may fall into the same time as the McCrimmon Parkway work. So when we're planning to try and close off as much Church Street as possible anyways, so hopefully it won't be much additional pain to what McCrimmon will give us. But more to come on that, but we're looking forward to having that completed. Another project that we just completed was Cary Parkway sidewalk from NC 54 to Sheldon Drive, which is actually in Cary. There's a small portion of sidewalk that we build in Cary. We partnered with Cary to build. We got 100% DOT funding on that, so there weren't any town funds spent on the construction, and that got completed in July. And we have one more sidewalk segment that we're hoping to get under construction later this fall, and that's on 54. It's actually two smaller segments on 54, one from Keybridge Drive to the Henrico Lane, which is the apartment entrance there for the Oaks at Weston apartment, and then again from Summit Ridge Loop, which is the second entrance for the Camden apartments right at Weston Parkway down to Morrisville Parkway. There's a small segment of sidewalk missing there that we're trying to fill. And again, that's 100% DOT funding. currently trying to finish up the design on that now and are hoping to get under construction either this fall or early spring next year. Just from these 4 sidewalk projects alone, we're somewhere around $1 million in sidewalk funding. And of that $1 million, less than half, or right around half, is town funds. So we've worked, again, really hard to try and maximize our town funding when we can. So any questions on these sidewalk projects?
Yes, Ben, the Church Street sidewalk, that will now complete our historic trail, right?
Yes, the lower one, the one from Morrisville Carpenter Road to Jeremiah Street, will complete what we're affectionately calling our town center walking loop.
Right.
Once we get that complete, actually, the next step is we have some signs, some interpretive signage that we're going to be putting up to the people can read as they walk to learn more about the history of Morrisville and the history of that area. We worked with our historian Ernest Dollar on that, so we're hoping to get those signs up once the construction's completed. We may also look at getting a bench or two out there and try and do some neat stuff that we can do with that sidewalk.
Good.
And then, of course, the upper Church Street sidewalk that just got completed also makes a nice walking loop around the schools. So it creates a complete loop on Church Street, Traybrook Drive, Town Hall Drive, and McCrimmon Parkway. So we now have we'll eventually soon have 2 loops on either side of Church Street, and we'll have one small segment that we'll have to try and get addressed on Church Street around Downing Glen to Traybrook Drive area. And again, that's one of those gaps. If we don't do it sooner, that'll be addressed as part of that on their DOT project that we'll be doing.
Very good.
Any other questions? All right. And then finally, I would be very remiss if I didn't remind everyone that we now have a really cool map, interactive map on the Planning Department website. And one of those tabs is Active Transportation Projects. So all the information I just talked about, you can find a lot of that on that map. We'll be continuing to update that and add some of these newer projects on there and add information as we're able to. But that is up there. You can click on any of those highlighted road projects and look at who's funding it and when the construction is estimated to begin. And again, especially for you, that's the same mapping system we use that you can go to look at new development, look at our zoning map, our current land use map, and our future land use map. Hopefully, as we continue to move forward and work on our technology side of things, we'll continue to work on adding functionality to our interactive map. Next is an update on the Comprehensive Transportation Plan. Again, this is the same presentation I gave yesterday to the Developers Council, so you as a Planning and Zoning Board have seen a lot of these slides, so I'll probably move through them fairly quickly. But I will take the opportunity to give you, let you know a couple of the comments that came out from Council Tuesday night when we talked about the transportation plan. And I'll tell you about those at the appropriate time. So as you know, we have our existing plan adopted in 2009, got our new plan update funded in 2016. We're still aiming for adoption later this year. We are hoping and working hard to try and get the adoption process at least started in the next couple months, and that, of course, will start with you. So stay tuned for some nice long meetings talking about transportation planning. As you know, the objectives of the plan was to, of course, update the previous plan, look out a little bit more to 2040. Our existing 2009 plan only looked out to the 2030, 2035 timeline, so we're trying to push that out a little bit more. And, of course, it looks at recommended improvements for roadways, transit, sidewalks, multi-use paths, greenways, and bike facilities. It's been a while, so you may have forgotten, but we did have an existing conditions summary that was completed as part of this effort. That'll be moved into the final document of the plan. It'll become one of the chapters. And again, that looked at transportation, land, and people in Morrisville. As a reminder, our growth rate, while still has been sort of falling, it remains strong, and it remains stronger than both Wake County and North Carolina. We also, as part of that, looked at our commute times. And as you can see, a majority of our commute time is around that 20 to 30 minute time, and that's for commutes starting in Morrisville and going elsewhere. And then, of course, we looked at where Morrisville residents were going to work, and a lot going to Raleigh. Other is primarily RTP, I think, and then, of course, Cary and Durham. We have our guiding principles that we've talked quite a bit about over the last few months that are continuing to move forward and be a basis for our transportation plan. And then, of course, we've had some pretty good public engagement. We had 50 to 60 folks come out over our 2 standalone open houses. We've had a few more than that come out to the first pre-meeting open house that we held before a council meeting several months ago. And we're going to have another pre-meeting open house at the August 22nd council meeting. So from about 5:30 to 6:30, we'll have the consultants here again to provide some updated information based on what we've done and the input we've taken to date. We had a fairly good response on our online survey, 267 responses. Would have liked to see that be several thousand, but 267 is pretty good. As y'all probably remember, we had a lot of folks who think that either transportation's gotten worse or roadways are the biggest problem. You saw this last month, I believe. It was our congestion map. Red is bad, yellow's getting bad, and blue and green you're okay for now, but you need to start thinking ahead. So we do have some red and we have a lot of yellow. And then this is the same roadway recommendations map that I believe you saw last month. A couple of concerns on this map that did come up at council. We have 2 what I would consider neighborhood connectors on here, neighborhood roadway connectors that council did voice some concern about, and we'll have some further discussion with them. One is up in Breckenridge from Millicent Way up to connect to Little Drive. It's a very short segment. There's actually right-of-way dedicated for a portion of that, but there's a lot of concern. There was concern voiced at council about the impacts that could have on Breckenridge, and there may be a desire to have that be a greenway or bike ped connection versus a full car connection. So more to come on that. And then the other one is the Clements Green Drive connector. That's on our 2009 plan. There was a resolution passed in 2011 by the council, a resolution of intent to remove that from the plan, thinking at that time an update would be done in 2012. That update was never done, so I brought that back up to council, and so they're continuing to look at that, and that's one that may or may not stay. As I told council, with both of these small neighborhood type connectors, from a model, from a system standpoint, they don't really do anything, but they're good ideas. And so, but ultimately it is a policy level decision that the council will have to make. Certainly, hopefully the PZB will make recommendations to council on this, but those are really policy level decisions. They don't benefit the greater network. They should benefit those neighborhoods, but it's not going to be the end of the world if they're not there.
Yeah, I mean, if I remember correctly, in like 2002 or 3, when I lived in Breckenridge, I mean, that road was always on the map to be done, and people actually got upset about it, and I think it was removed. So, I mean, I guess it's not surprising people would be upset about it now, but I mean, it's something that was always contemplated.
Yeah, and that's one that, for whatever reason, was not on our 2009 plan. So when we started looking at things, we realized there was some right-of-way there, so we pulled it back onto the plan as a, hey, this may, it looks like this was meant to be here, and more than anything wanted to have a discussion about it. So that discussion is starting with council now, and of course also with y'all.
Well, going back in history, we fought very hard for that to be there when we were looking at the Breckenridge plan. And I think there's a topographical issue. It goes down, I think, and then up.
Yeah.
And so there was discussion about it wouldn't be very practical in the future, but we wanted to have that possible link at the time to RTP. So to see it used as a greenway or something, or a bicycle path, I think would be will be nice, an acknowledgement that it was a good thing in the first place.
Yeah, certainly if it's not going to be a roadway connection, I think a bike ped connection will be really good there. One of the arguments that was brought up at council for taking it off is that with Lewis Stevens now being committed and being constructed in the next year or two, the Breckenridge community will now have bookends at Davis Drive and Lewis Stevens to get up to Little. So is there really a need to have another connection in the middle of the community? And like I said, it's really at this point it's a policy level decision, but certainly if it's not going to be a roadway, I think there is a strong desire to have it be a bike ped connection at least. So we'll work towards that if the roadway comes off. We also have our multimodal recommendations in the plan. And again, this is where if that Millicent connection comes off the roadway, it'll be moved over to this map as a bike ped connection, as one of our neighborhood connectors for that. And then, of course, we have our transit plan recommendations that I know we had quite a bit of discussion last month here about the transit. And I know one of the discussion points last month was showing some sort of local circulator type service to serve northern Morrisville, to serve the middle of Morrisville, and some of these areas that all the big lines are going around. Mentioned that also to council, and we had a little bit of discussion with council about that. One of the things that I've talked to our consultants about is instead of putting a line on the map now that may or may not be correct, I think a good idea would be to make one of the implementation steps to be looking at a circulator type study for future circulator service to better determine exactly where such a service would need to go, where it would need to stop, what areas would be best to serve. Because right now, if we put it on the map, it really would probably primarily be lines drawn on a map without a whole lot of thought. We certainly can do our best, but doing some sort of study, and that also will allow us to, on the Wake Transit side, have the community funding area program management plan be completed. That's currently underway now, or actually kicking off, I believe, next week. And so right now, we don't know how that community funding area is going to work that's authorized in the Wake Transit plan. There's not a lot of funding for it at this point. So that's one of the reasons we, as on the transit side, decided to do a program management plan to figure out how's it going to work? Is it going to be a competitive grant program or other? And then does there need to be more money put towards that? And so I think at this point, the best recommendation that staff and the consultants will make on that is for this transit piece, for now, leave the big Wake Transit lines on the map and then have some detailed implementation steps to do some further, more detailed study just in Morrisville for what we can do for transit. We'll be able to get an appropriate consultant who has a little bit more transit experience as well to do that. And we'll have more detail about the Wake Transit funding side of things before we go through and do a lot of study. So
I think that's a great idea. And in particular, it'd be good for us to be ready with a plan when the funding becomes available.
And that's the other thing, is that we would have a detailed plan that when that funding's available, we can go and say, not only do we want the funding, but look, we've studied it.
Correct.
We know what we need to do. So stay tuned, but that's probably the direction we'll head unless there's a strong desire to go another way.
That's a direct example of how wonderful it is to have you and your expertise on board, because in the past, we lost out because we weren't even at the table. We didn't have anything ready. So good, great job.
Okay. Thank you.
So the red on here, is that going to be increased? Is that new bus service as part of this transportation plan? I mean, because I've noticed they're starting to announce some things. And so far, it seems like Raleigh is getting a really good deal out of the Wake County transportation plan, and not a lot of anybody else is getting any additional service yet. So
and there is reasons for that.
Because they need all our money to pay for it? I mean,
no. One of the biggest reason that right now all the additional service that just started is in Raleigh, Cary, and with Go Triangle, is because we weren't ready to really add new service. So we wanted to put, we as Wake Trans, as a greater Wake Transit, wanted to get something out there to show the citizens we're using your money and trying to provide something to you instead of just saying we're doing planning. And so the easiest thing to do was to add hours to bus routes, add time, add Sunday service. So that's what's being done now. The other reason that Raleigh, especially even beyond in the further plans, looks like it's getting more service is because to support transit, you need high density, and Raleigh has that high density. They have some really high density corridors there, and they already have transit service, and they have proven that their transit service is pretty successful. So obviously that's an important place to invest in to continue that success. With that said, for Morrisville, we're very lucky in our location in that there's a understanding and a belief with Wake Transit that Morrisville also is going to warrant a lot of bus service. It's just because we don't currently really have much other than the small service we have in Perimeter Park, it's going to take us a little bit longer to get that planning in place to really know what our service needs to be and where our stops need to be. So on this map, just as to answer your other question as far as the different colors, the blue dotted line, of course, is a commuter rail. The red line is a 30-minute headway service that goes really between I-40 and the airport and hits McCrimmon. And then all the red lines on here are 30-minute service, and I believe the yellow line that goes out 540 and down 55 is more of a commuter express type service that may only be about an hour headway. So the other really good news is that we're scheduled to get 30-minute headway service, which is really good. Not all the communities in Wake County are getting 30-minute service. There's a lot of them that are only getting 60-minute service. So while it's not the 15-minute service that a lot of Raleigh's getting, 30 minutes is pretty good for us, and we can hopefully continue to build on that as time goes on. And then finally, next steps, I already mentioned the August 22nd council meeting. Our consultants will also provide a brief update to council at the beginning of that meeting after the open house. Remaining work, which we've talked a little bit about here, but I'll remind you what some of the other products you'll see coming to you. We'll have some scenario planning report cards, which will do a much better job explaining the scenario planning than I did last month, and will show how the different scenarios will really impact some important criteria that we have. So look forward to looking at those. We'll also be bringing forth our revised cross sections and road typology. We're going to a little bit, whereas our plan now is very micro in that every major roadway has its own cross section. We're going to go a little bit more macro and go to a roadway typology, because especially when you look at roadways, a lot of them have similar characteristics, so we can have the same cross section for several roads while still maintaining some variability. So we'll be looking at that and have a lot more detail on that coming up. We'll also be bringing forth our finalized prioritization criteria, the recommended prioritization criteria based on our consultants' work, as well as all the public input and the input from you and the input from town council. And we'll also have a process for that outlined in the plan a little bit. And then we'll, of course, have our prioritized list of future roadway projects. And that is really going to look at the roadway projects that aren't currently funded. So it'll be fairly short. It'll be a fairly short list, which is good, but it'll have some important projects on there. And of course, we are going to have some project cost estimates that'll be fairly high level, but hopefully a little bit better cost estimates than we had in our last plan. And then, of course, all that will be pulled together with some other information into our final report. And again, our goal is to bring that to you hopefully within the next month or two to start working through that. And I think later tonight we may be talking to you a little bit about scheduling at least one additional work session coming up to try and work through this transportation plan.
Is there a place that where the Lucie's station is documented? Is that seen on our website? Is that actually a carrier project?
No, that is our project. Well, it's a DOT project. So we don't currently have we don't have much information about it on our website. It is on that active transportation projects page. So you can click on it and see the funding schedule, which I think we need to update on there. But we don't know a whole lot about it yet since DOT's been doing it. So we haven't had a lot of information to post. But certainly as they get closer to construction, we'll start trying to get more information on our website about that. All right, and moving. I think this is the last thing is a quick Wake Transit Plan implementation update, which I think you've probably heard most of this, but it bears repeating. Had actually a lot of work done to date. The Transit Planning Advisory Committee was formed. It has membership from every municipality in Wake County, as well as RTP, NC State, and the transit agencies. The TPAC has adopted the FY17 work plan, which was completed at the end of June this year, which that pretty much was saying, well, whatever tax money we get in FY17, it goes straight to fund balance. So that was an easy work plan to do. They've also adopted the FY18 work plan. That's what's currently underway now, and that's what's funding the additional bus service that has just been started, I believe, on Sunday at Go Triangle, Go Raleigh, and Go Cary. There's been quite a bit of news coverage of that. Unfortunately, it doesn't really help us here in Morrisville, but our neighbors are getting some better service, a little bit shorter headways and longer hours, and some Sunday service. So as you know, the half-cent sales tax was implemented in April, and the additional vehicle registration tax for Wake County was implemented in July. Those are all help go to fund all these things. On the town side, we signed and approved the Wake Transit Master Participation Agreement. We've also approved and signed the Wake County Vehicle Registration Tax Interlocal Agreement, which just gives up the town's right to that funding and says we're okay with that funding going to Wake Transit. That funding would have been very difficult for the town to get access to anyways, so it makes more sense to have it go to the county level transit. And also, as I mentioned, we've now had additional bus service added on the three bus operators in the area: Go Triangle, Go Cary, and Go Raleigh, with some shorter headway Sunday service and additional hours. And finally, we're as part of the FY18 work, we have several studies that are underway to continue working on implementing the Wake Transit Plan. There's a multi-year bus service implementation plan that's currently underway, and that's really looking at all the future bus service and how best to implement that, get a schedule for implementing that, and look at the cost for implementing that. That plan itself is about an 18-month plan, so it'll be next year before it's really complete, but that plan will help inform the FY19 work plan. We're also kicking off the Transit Corridors Major Investment Study. That's the one that we're most interested in. That's the study that's going to look at the BRT, the bus rapid transit routes, as well as the commuter rail. And so that study's getting ready to kick off, and I am on the core technical team for that, so I'll be heavily involved in that study. There's also a staffing model and expectations plan that's looking countywide, but really focusing in on Wake County and the transit agencies and Campo for needed staffing to continue implementing the plan. And as we get more bus and other transit service, what kind of staffing do different agencies need to look at? That plan will address potential staffing for the municipalities as well. So we are keeping an eye on that plan. We also are getting ready to have our kickoff on the community funding, or we have had our kickoff on the community funding area program management plan. So that's underway, and I am also involved in that. And then finally, we have a public engagement strategy that's underway to try and make sure that as we move forward with Wake Transit Plan implementation, that we continue to outreach to the public early and often and make sure that we have all the proper touches with the public to get the input we need to be able to create the new bus routes and get the stops located and everything, as well as ensure that we work under, we continue to try and work under this Wake Transit Plan umbrella and brand, even though there's all different transit agencies. So they're looking at a couple different things with that strategy. And then finally, the TPAC's beginning work on the FY19 work plan, which is the budget for fiscal year 19. And because there's so many parties involved, it's on an even more accelerated schedule than even the town's budget, which that work begins in December. By December, January, the TPAC will have released its FY19 work plan, the initial draft of that, and again, planning for final adoption in May of June of next year for that.
Can you remind me again who's on the TPAC?
On the TPAC, so there's one representative from all the what I would consider non-core municipalities. So Morrisville, Morrisville, Apex, Holly Springs, Fuquay-Varina, Garner, Wake Forest, Zebulon, Wendell, Knightdale. I think that's, and then one representative from RTP, one representative from NC State, and then Cary, Raleigh, and the transit agencies in Campo all have between 2 and 3 or 2 and 5 representatives, depending on, and Wake County's in there too, with more representation, again, because they were some of the core members and provided some additional funding at the beginning.
Thank you.
Any other questions about transit?
I have a question. I don't know I really don't know what it comes under. When I look at all of this, one of the things that has been a concern, and I brought it up one time before, and I don't see it in planning, and some of these are taking us out to 2030, and that is the grade separation for pedestrian crosswalks in the town of Morrisville. I am really concerned about that, especially in that northern corridor that we have, because we have that big Walmart area over there. We have another townhouse development coming right there at the county line, and you have several developments along Church Street that will have absolutely no access to what's over on 54 unless they're coming all the way down to McCrimnum or going all the way up to Hobson. Has anyone looked at or considered having any kind of discussion or public comments or concerns from the community to address some of those issues and maybe begin to plan and implement something that won't take us to 2050 to implement?
We haven't looked in depth at that. We've talked about it. I know that you've brought it up, and I'm not aware that it was brought up a whole lot during our public input, but I believe we talked a little bit about it with council as well, and we'll continue to bring that up. And ultimately, that's a policy level decision. There's not necessarily any good data to show that it's needed or not. One of the biggest concerns or roadblocks to it wouldn't be hard to put it on the plan. The biggest thing would be there are probably several roadblocks to actually getting one constructed. One of which, of course, is coordinating with the railroad and getting their permission. The other one is that the cost. Those are pretty costly. I'm not sure if we would be able to get any non-town funding, so something like that may be all town funding, although I know we've talked with the railroad in the past and they've said that they're willing to work with towns on those type of things. So certainly we can we'll work on reaching back out to the railroad on that. That more than anything probably needs to again be brought up to council. And I would say one of the best ways to do that is to continue to bring it up here. We can, if we can get consensus from the Planning and Zoning Board, we can certainly add, at least one dot on our map. I think we'll have that as a discussion item in the plan. But if you feel strongly enough that we should recommend that there be one, we can certainly put that on the plan and move that forward to council for further discussion. We can always put on the plan and then have an implementation step be look for more funding. Generally speaking, I know vehicle grade separations can be anywhere from $12 million on the low side to 40, 20, 30, $40 million. Those pedestrian ones are probably in the range of $5 to $10 million most of the time. So that is still that still will be a heavy ask with the town budget. But certainly if it's an important thing, like I said, we can add it into the plan and have further discussion about it.
Could I add that from the railroad point of view, the success stories have been actually pedestrian underpasses. They've done one at Elon, one at UNCG. But what you had in both those in cases was the large educational institution that furnished a lot of money, although the railroad did throw in, I think they threw in $1 million at Elon, and I think they threw in maybe $3 million at UNCG, and that's, old money. That's 2010 money. So don't lose sight of that in your quest, I guess, to say, because the road underpass seems to be certainly more palatable to NCRR, and finding some kind of institutional backup on it would be a big help in pursuing some of those projects.
And I mean, to that point, we do have Wake Tech going on now, so maybe that. I think 3 years ago, before Wake Tech, we knew Wake Tech was definitely coming. It may have been a little bit more questionable, but with Wake Tech there, we certainly have a little bit more of a. We certainly have more reasons to push for that. So, and again, this just. I started with some fun pictures, so I figured I'd end with some fun pictures. And as you know, it's coming up on football season, so I got to keep my pirate in there. So, with that, if you have any other questions on anything, or otherwise, we can move on to the next presentation.
Would you like to take a 5-minute break then?
I'm okay if
okay?
I'm okay to keep going if y'all are.
Well, you're tremendous. We'll keep going then. Thank you. I liked your beginning and ending slide. Very good.
What?
I liked those beginning and ending slides. It's good.
Thank you. It probably didn't help that it was either early in the morning or late in the evening when I was working on some of them. So, trying to make transportation fun when I can. So, and this is a presentation that actually gave to council on aviation parkway grade separation. So, apologize for the date that says July, but I know that there was an interest in having the Planning and Zoning Board see this information as well. So, apologize, I didn't get the latest one in there. So, Aviation Parkway project, as we know, the widening is funded. DOT is currently working on the environmental permitting and the design for Aviation Parkway widening project. As part of that, they're trying to study, they want to study some alternatives for the Aviation NC-54 railroad crossing intersection. They have determined that there needs to be some interim improvements at that intersection no matter what. The traffic studies that have been done just show that intersection doesn't work anymore. So they know they need to do some interim improvements with the widening project. As they started looking at interim improvements, they sort of stopped and said, well, we know we need interim improvements, but we don't necessarily want to go build interim improvements that then will have to be torn out in a few years if a grade separation comes in. So why don't we take this opportunity to start looking at the grade separation now? Then that way we can design our interim improvements to go along with the ultimate grade separation. So that's what they're doing now. The other another reason for looking at the grade separation options and alternatives now is also that if they can look at those as part of the environmental study and even get the environmental study to narrow down to the preferred alternative, that'll help us when and if Aviation Parkway grade separation is funded in the future for construction. That'll allow it to move that much quicker since we already have some environmental documentation done on it. So, again, NCDOT and I think the railroad, if you ask them, prefers the grade separation as ultimate solution. It seals the railroad corridor, makes it safer. Over the next 10 years, we're going to have continual increase in the number of trains using that corridor. We know Amtrak is increasing their frequency and adding trains between here and Charlotte, which uses that corridor. And of course, the other big thing is we're hoping for commuter rail. And if we get commuter rail, you're looking at anywhere from 5 to 8 to 10 or more trains in the mornings and evenings using that corridor on a 30-minute headway. So if you think about it today, the gates of the railroad will be down a lot more in the mornings and afternoons than they'll be up, and so that's going to continue to cause a lot more congestion. And of course, removing that at-grade intersection will decrease overall congestion on 54 and Aviation Parkway by either removing or moving a stoplight and allowing some better operations there. So, and actually, if you'll allow me a minute, I just realized this is an older presentation, so let me pull up the most current one to make sure that I give y'all the most up-to-date information. Now, I apologize for not having the updated one available at first. So again, NCDOT is looking to study up to 3 alternatives. Originally, they had said we only want to study 2. Then they were nice enough to come back and say, well, we would be willing to study 3. So, so they would like to study up to 3 alternatives, whether it be through an environmental study or through a feasibility study. But now is the time to look at that intersection, look at that grade separation. So again, will help guide the decision that they'll make on interim intersection improvements as part of the Aviation Parkway widening project. And then again, if we do some environmental work now, it'll allow the future grade separation, if it's funded, to get accelerated. So the main question that council had to was asked to address was, is council and the town willing to at least allow or work with DOT to study that grade separation option, knowing that it would not lock the town into the grade separation option as ultimate solution. We will still have opportunities to say no thank you, and it will allow additional public input during the Aviation Parkway widening project workshops on that grade separation, and it will also give us some more detailed information on the grade separation alternatives. So what are those alternatives? The first one is essentially using the existing alignment and elevating Morrisville, Carpenter Road, and Aviation Parkway over top of the railroad and NC 54. As you can see from this map, at its height, the roadway is anywhere from about 30 to 35 feet above the ground. You can see the other thing that DOT shows here is a future alignment for 54, moving it off of the railroad corridor further to the north. The other thing that this shows is also a future quadrant loop that could be used to get traffic from Aviation Parkway over to 54. So moving all those turning movements away from the railroad tracks.
I'm assuming there'd be 2 stoplights, like on either end.
Yeah, it would be similar to a traditional interchange. So you'd have a stoplight on the 54 side and a stoplight on the Aviation Parkway side. This option, while it does minimize impacts by staying on the same corridor, there's still a lot of impacts. There's a lot of visual impacts, including to our Pew House, and of course a lot of impacts to the homes on Aviation Parkway on the north side around Cotton Place and Cedar Fork District Park.
Not as much as tearing them down.
Correct, and it remains to be seen.
They might like the road to be elevated, honestly, because it would take the noise above their house. I mean,
Yeah, well, it remains to be seen if any of them would need to be, some of them may still need to be torn down even with this option. Some of the things the DOT will look at as they get into more detailed, a more detailed look at some of this is, can they do walls or would they need to do slopes? Obviously, if they need to do slopes, they need a lot more space. The houses have to go away. If they do walls, the houses may be able to remain, but then they have nice, tall concrete walls right in front of the front door. So again, none of these options are good. If any of you heard any of the council discussion, you have heard at least Councilmember Johnson, and I know the mayor, say multiple times that they don't like any of these options. But it's good to start looking at them and just get some more information. One important note on this option is that the impacts are high, but potentially manageable. One of the biggest impacts would be during construction, and at which time the road would have to be shut down at this crossing, and that's going to be a concern of the council. Obviously, will continue to be a concern of the town, as potentially having to shut this intersection down for up to 2 years while a grade separation is constructed.
Why would they need to do that?
In order to build the road over top.
They can't build half the road at one time. I mean, that's totally possible. This is like a whole pie in the sky, clean sheet design here. That's totally possible to do that. We definitely shouldn't start with giving up and just saying, "Oh well." That's preposterous to think.
That we'll, as we know more about the options, certainly would look into that. At this time, it's really hard to say. I think one of the things that DOT has been really cautious, especially with this and giving us information, is trying to give us absolute worst case scenario. So
they can just come back and do a better job and figure out a better case scenario. I mean, it may take a little bit of number crunching, but I mean, it's possible to build. You've got a 2-lane road now. You can build 2 lanes and 2 lanes. I mean, and come up with a 4-lane road. I mean, that's It very well may be possible, and like I said, that's all information we would continue to look at as we get further along in the process.
All these alternatives, excuse me for interrupting, all these alternatives have 2 big requirements. They're putting 2 more tracks down for NCRR, and they're moving the NC 54 right-of-way off of NCRR's right-of-way. That makes the span length on these bridges extremely long, and I'm not going to say it. When the span lengths are long, the beams are very deep. And when they're very deep, they have to be very high because you have to have clearance for the railroad. It has 23 feet from the top of the rail to the bottom of the beam. So all that has to be done. You have to drive piles, and most of them do secant piles in these areas. So you have to have big pile drivers out there, and it's naive to think that it's something that's easy to do.
I'm not thinking it's easy to do, but I just feel like too often, we have been taking the brunt of everyone else driving through our town for all these years, and with very little done to help the people who live here try to navigate traffic from tens of thousands of cars that come from other places. And then to shut this road down for 2 years, not only it would affect everybody in Morrisville, but it would affect everyone on either side. I mean, that would be a massive slap in the face to the people who are paying for all these projects to be done. In my opinion. To not even consider that could be an alternative.
I think we're all going to have quite a reaction to any of these. So why don't you plow through, and then we'll hit you at once.
One final note I'll make on this one, on the potential road closure construction issues. On the good side of things, this is not a funded project yet, so we know that the earliest it would be funded is in 2 years. It would make it into the plan in 2 years, and then it would probably not be funded for construction for at least another 3 to 5. The good side of that is that by that time we'll have our McCrimmon Parkway extension completed, we'll have our McCrimmon Parkway grade separation completed, we'll have McCrimmon Parkway widening completed, we'll have part of 54 widening completed, we'll have Morrisville Carpenter Road widening completed. So we'll have some really good road projects that if the worst did come to surface, that we had to do some closure in this area, we would have some good detour routes available for our citizens. So that's a good thing. But that also goes back to the transportation plan, as well as continuing to look for and at those possible connectors and connections, and increasing our connectivity, especially our roadway connectivity in town, to try and take pressure off of these important intersections. Moving on to alignment number 5. This is, I think, no one's favorite alignment. It is highly impactful to a lot of different people at a lot of different properties, one of which is our Cedar Fork District Park, in that it takes out most of our soccer fields that we have in town with this alignment. It also heavily impacts property on the west side of NC 54 and some existing shopping center property. Again, and I apologize for the map, it may be a little bit hard to read, but you're getting to that 25, 30, 35 feet height down here. You're not getting back to existing grade until up in this area or up in this area on this side. So you're looking at the road being somewhat elevated from here all the way through, anywhere from about around 5 feet here to 17 feet over on this side.
Most of that is borderline floodplain land over there anyway, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of floodplain land. Right now, the floodplain comes right around the what would be the northern edge of the future NC 54, and then there is some floodplain down here on this side as well.
Probably some kind of
We would close off aviation on that, right?
Correct. On this alternative and alternative 3, the existing Morrisville Carpenter Road to Aviation Parkway 54 intersection could remain open. And this does not impact the Pew House as much, but it does impact the historic property down at the end of Page Street.
You said alternative 3. You meant alternative 5 and alternative 7, 2 that don't require.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. Apologize. And then moving on to alternative 7, which is very similar to alternative 5, but tightened up a little bit to try and minimize or limit the impacts to our Cedar Fork District Park, as well as limiting impacts to the private property. There's still impacts to the shopping center over here. It still moves Morrisville Carpenter Road south here. Potentially heavier impacts to the Pew House here and these private properties. Again, you're looking at 20, 30, 35 feet height and roadway here with not getting back to existing grade till somewhere around here or here. This is highly impactful to part of Cotton Place. It takes out an entire row of homes as well as these properties through here. And again, you'll see on all 3 of these alignments, they did show connectors or loop roads back to an intersection. Those are preliminary just to show how it may be connected. So certainly this one's connected here. That doesn't mean it couldn't connect up through here some other way. So, and then one thing, some new information that DOT provided was some level comparison of impacts, which I looked at their information and did modify it a little bit based on some local knowledge. But again, alternative 3, the town owns many of the impacted parcels west of NC 54. The closure impacts may be mitigated by the improved road network, but there's some still fairly high impacts with potential relocations of properties. One of those being the Pew House. It very well could need to be relocated or have a very tall concrete wall in front of it. Alternative 3 is lower impacts to the town park. It is more consistent with our current road network and our local plans. Highest impact with the potential closure, and again, highest impact with visual impacts to the Pew House. Alternative 5, it does impact mostly undeveloped property, but it has very high impact to our town park. And then alternative 7 has a highest amount of impact to developed private property, especially west of NC 54, and still has impacts to our town park.
So alternatives 1, 2, 4, and 6 were just so bad they wouldn't even show them to anybody?
No, and this was a point that had been, or a question that had been brought up in the past. The alternative numbers really don't mean much of anything. Alternatives 1, 2, 4, and 6 were versions of alternatives 3, 5, and 7. The way the consultant for NCDOT was drawing up these alternatives, every time they changed something to what they viewed as enough, they gave it a new alternative number. So these have been the only 3 alternatives that have really ever been shown. They have said that they looked at other alternatives that they never really drew up. including looking at an underpass, looking at potential grade separation to the north, moving the road to the north of Morrisville Carpenter Road, and those didn't work because they had even higher impacts than these, or they had constructability issues. Speaking to the underpass option, that one has high constructability issues, which is why it's not proposed. Couple reasons to that. One, there's a stream. If you look on this map, there's a stream here. Of course, you have Crabtree Creek right down here. So you have a large culvert here. In order to get the road underneath the railroad, you'd have to drop it so far down, you probably would be in the water table, and you would have a situation similar to what they have in Apex on Highway 55, where if it rains enough, you're going to flood that intersection and not be able to use that underpass. And relating to that, the railroad is currently in the process of replacing their railroad trestle down here over Crabtree Creek. That design is nearly complete, and they have told DOT they are not redesigning that. That is setting their grade. They will not change their grade. And so without the railroad being willing or able to change the elevation of their rail, all of the grade change has to be on the road side, and that just puts the road in such a hole that it's really not a feasible project to complete.
What reason did the railroad folk decide they're not going to change their grade?
So and Craig can speak to this because I know he's worked with the railroads a lot more than I, but generally speaking, railroads don't like to do more than about a 1% grade.
Yeah, from a railroad operating point of view, if you're going to carry from the time you leave the at grade crossing at Aviation Parkway until you get to Morrisville, it just happens to be the steepest grade between Raleigh and Greensboro. That means that all trains are restricted to the amount of tonnage they can pull up and down. If you live close like I do, you'll hear them groaning when they pull it, and you'll hear them going dynamic when they go west. So to change that grade is not just right there at that bridge. It means that you would be, by the time you got to the new grade separation that we've just built, you'd be impacting that grade separation. You can't lower that. So you've got to rebuild a new structure there, and you've got to take it all the way through there. So that railroads are not like just from the way they operate. They just can't have a little bump in the track and go on. They can't have a little speed table there. They have to have a long grade because they pull long tonnage trains across there. That being said, there's not these are going to be truly flyovers, and when they're, it doesn't matter which alternative you pick. When you go over the railroad at that, you're going to be up in the air. You're literally going to be looking down on the town. I mean, you're going to be up there. So the further east, like Alternative 5 and Alternative 7, the further west you go, the more you're moving up the grade. So the higher the bridge has to be. That's why you'll notice it has a roadway height of 35 feet in Alternative 7 and a roadway.
One of these said 40-something, I think. You couldn't quite read it.
Yeah, I saw a 35.
Yeah,
well, why can't
35 and 40-some, yeah. So that's the reason.
Well,
to do it.
I guess my concern is, why can't the train track go over the road instead of us having to do a grade separation with the... I mean, I can see all of the alternatives we have here, but has anyone, I guess we have not because we asked not, but I don't understand why that railroad track can't be the one that's up 25 feet or 30 feet or whatever it takes to go all the way across.
Yeah, and that's where,
and
I mean,
take
DOT
it
did look at that. DOT even looked at...
When you live extra, it'll be, the railroad will be 10 feet high where you want people to walk across. That's what would happen. It'd be 20 feet high right here.
He's saying it takes miles on either
Yeah,
side.
and that's what I understand.
DOT even looked at relocating the rail, into where 54 is today. 54 can be relocated, adding a rail and elevating it there. And again, the same issue. The biggest issue is that the grade is set. And what the railroad has said is that where it crosses Crabtree Crossing on that trestle, and the new trestle is going to be at the same grade, that's what they call their sag point, or really their lowest point in the area. And so if they're not willing to change the elevation of that, they only have a few hundred feet. And their general rule that I've been told at least is that they're aiming for 1% grade, meaning for every 1 foot in height you have 100 feet of run. And so in order to get and for the rail to go over the roadway, there's a minimum. I think the federal minimum's around 14 feet is what DOT and the federal government like to see with roads. Whereas and that's where with the road going over the rail, as Craig said, it'll be really high too, because when a road goes over the rail, you need at least 24 feet. So while you do need more clearance for the road to go over the rail, but in this location, it's just nearly impossible to get that railroad to go up over the road at all.
It's also disruptive to their business, because whenever you build that track that's going over, you have to have another track. So just like you have a detour for a highway, you have a detour track for a railroad. So you're not only are you increasing the costs because of the structure, you're increasing the cost because you have to run that detour track for 2 years while they build the bridge to put it over with. So you have all the wherewithal for the detour track that needs to be built. And believe me, railroad people, I'm one of them, they don't make the same thing that our hardworking friends at fast food make. They make a lot of money, so they charge a lot of money. And when you do that, it just shoots your kites. It really gets in the feasibility issue of it as well.
So and again, I mean, all these questions and more detail on this information would be provided, as we move forward and get to study these three alternatives even more in depth. But really, I hate to say it, but these are probably the best three alternatives we have. And none of them are good. I think everyone recognizes that. Even DOT recognizes that the alternatives are not great. It comes with being in a very constrained corridor from the rail, from the road, from everything else. So, but it's worth studying these alternatives, getting a little bit more information about them, and then we can still, like I said, the town can still decide a couple years down the road from now, after getting this information back, we can still decide. You know what? We don't want a grade separation right now, and we do have that ability. Luckily, with our close work with Campo, any major road project that NCDOT wants to fund, Campo technically has to okay that. So, and Campo has said, Campo works for the jurisdictions it serves. So Campo works for us, not for DOT. So we will always have the opportunity to go back to Campo and say, look, this isn't the right time for the grade separation, or we don't want it at all. No, but we'll have a better idea of all the impacts of not choosing to grade separate or choosing to grade separate.
I'd like to give everybody an opportunity to react to that. Do you have more charts?
Yeah, just a couple more things I was going to show. Some interim alternatives that NCDOT has provided that could be built with the Aviation Parkway widening. Essentially just 2 quadrant loops, one on the southeast running through a portion of our park, and then one, what they call the northeast quadrant, running approximately along Cotton Drive and then back out to 54. These 2 interim alternatives are more likely things that we may see with the widening project of 54. With the widening project of Aviation Parkway to be constructed, because they move all those turning movements, they get them away from the Morrisville Carpenter Road 54, and they move them further down so the traffic has more area to back up without having to deal with the railroad. So I did just want to show those, and again, those will be studied as part of the widening project, and we'll get some more information on those.
All right, so here's a crazy question. Am I wrong in that this tears up what we're getting ready to build?
If they, alternative 5 and 7...
even the temporary interim, is that not just tearing up what we're getting ready to build next year?
No, because both these temporary interims are on the east side.
So we're going to get 5 lanes now? This is showing 5 lanes across the track.
Oh, well, and I wouldn't put a whole lot of... Okay. I don't know. With the work we're doing, It'll remain to be 4 lanes across the track, but a 5th lane will pop out heading west as soon as you get away from the railroad. So right around Page Street, you'll see a 5th lane pop out. I'm not sure why they may be showing 5 lanes across the track here, but at this point there's no plans to have any more than 4 lanes across those tracks.
So what benefit does it add to traffic?
For these quadrant loops, it moves all that turning traffic away from the railroad and takes it takes the conflict points where it is today, you not only have all the roadway conflict points, you also have the railroad conflict point. It removes that railroad conflict point. So it provides more stacking space for those left turning vehicles, and it removes the railroad from the equation of having to deal with the turning traffic.
I mean, if closing the road is ever a consideration, it would seem like prioritizing Airport Boulevard and maybe an overpass there where nobody's currently going would be step 1, and then this would maybe step 2 to mitigate that traffic loss.
Yeah, and that's certainly that is in our transportation plan. It's in our current plan. We're continuing to keep that in the plan. Council has brought that up as well. We're going to continue to push that. And I've been talking to Campo and working closely with them to try and get that Airport Boulevard grade separation put into the next round of prioritization. So hopefully that'll go through and we'll actually have a score on that next spring to see how that competes with all the other projects in the area. And then this was just the final slide I gave council. They at the meeting Tuesday night they didn't make an official motion or anything, but by consensus they agreed that it's probably a good time to go on and study the alternatives. They asked DOT to go on and study all 3 versus only 2 of them. So DOT is will be moving forward with studying the 3 alternatives. The one thing that we'll have to continue work with DOT and waiting to hear from them on is whether those alternatives will be studied as part of the environmental work that's being done with the Aviation Parkway widening, or whether they'll be studied separately as a feasibility study, which is similar to what they did with NC 54 and more study. So, but there will be a lot more study. We'll have a lot more information. We'll start to have some public meetings probably next year to give the public and you and the town council and others an opportunity to weigh in on some of these alternatives and get some more information.
Thank you, Ben. I'd like to ask each of us to give our reactions, and let's start with Rex.
I have some comments.
Arlene.
My first reaction with those roadways is, oh my goodness. I do like that northeast quadrant loop, though. Is that going to knock down all those horrible buildings along the right side of Chapel Hill? So let's go for that. Yeah. It is a big problem. It's a big problem. There's no easy answer.
Yeah,
Craig.
I could talk forever, but when you look at funding, and a big piece of it is going to be property. And since the town controls a lot of properties on one of these alternatives, we don't want to lose sight of that. And the second thing is 73%, was that the study said traffic was our biggest problem. Not enough soccer fields was not a big problem. And, just don't lose sight of that. That in all deference to soccer parents of the world.
Thanks, Craig. Esther, any further reaction?
I guess my only concern is as I look at this, and especially the proposals that we had here, is that it seems like we put the cart before the horse in terms of development, because we have all the, especially coming along Aviation Parkway, where we've had Cotton Place and all those other housing developments coming up there. And now we're looking at, and of course the moving Page House too. And I look at all the money that the town has spent doing that to make it a historic site. And now we're looking at just doing whatever we're going to do to it so that it's no longer that. It's just something stuck down in a hole
Should have
for
left
you
the
to
wheels
look
on
at
it.
as you walk by.
Should have left the wheels on it.
Exactly. Should have left it on the wheels, or maybe should have sold it to me for $1 and I'd have moved it somewhere. But I am really concerned about the fact that we do have all of those houses now along Cotton Place, and we're looking at, I don't like walls. And I don't like developments that are divided by walls, or, there's no transition in from one to the other. And even with this whole idea of putting up any kind of walls in our town, I simply don't like that. And I don't know where we're going to go with it, but I think we've got to be very careful as we go in the future in terms of accepting development coming through, and then we don't have the transportation plan in place.
Right. And I will say this is probably one area that that the town probably should have spent more time. I mean, over the years, the town has spent funds and looked at this area and different plans. I think one of the things that they never really, previous councils had said that had made the decision that they didn't really want to see a grade separation here, so that was off the table for a long time. I know in our town center plan, one of the things that they had looked at was what they call two-way pair, and splitting 54 and moving it around a little bit, which would have helped, but still doesn't solve the ultimate issue. I will say this is DOT leading this, not the town, so we certainly are involved and will make our voice heard, but at the same time, with these being state roads, we only have so much voice. Luckily, we have very good friends at Campo who have a bigger voice than we do. So, and then the final thing is that I do want you to remember as you look at these alternatives, they are all purposefully they were shown as the most conservative or the worst that they could be. One things that in previous meetings that town staff have had with DOT that we had a lot of discussion about was there are a lot of ways to minimize these impacts, to shorten up when the road starts being elevated and to shorten, even narrow down that elevation as much as possible. So those are all options that if this were to ever be moved forward into funding, those are all options we would heavily pursue. And DOT has agreed that, if they ever had to move into full design, they would pursue design exceptions. So, the state has said they want to see the railroad 24 feet 3 inches. They want to see the roadway 24 feet 3 inches over the railroad. The federal government only requires 23 feet 6 inches. So that's a design exception that'll bring it down a little bit. A higher grade. So they designed it looking at a 4 to 5% grade. What if we go to 6 to 8%? So yes, it's more of a hill, but you're not going. It's a shorter hill versus a longer hill. So things like that, where we'll continue to look at if this does move forward into any level of more detailed design. Obviously, with the goal of minimizing impact not only on this side of the railroad tracks and the Pew House, but truly looking to minimize impact as much as possible on our residents in Cotton Place and other areas along that aviation corridor.
Anything else, Lester? No. Lee.
I guess I would just urge you to do everything you can to try to get them to come up with some novel solutions and think outside the box. I mean, they can get very pigeonholed in their ways of doing things, and the traveling public is going to suffer. You're going to take away close to 10% of the houses in Cotton Place, which is going to then put burden onto every other homeowner as far as their HOA dues going to have to go up to cover for the fact that their houses are gone. It's going to have a lot of different impacts. I mean, to somehow ignore that because it's not easy to do is just not, it's not doing a service to the taxpaying public. I mean, there's definitely a way to do that, and it doesn't have to shut the road down, and that you can minimize the impacts. But somebody's got to push DOT to do that.
And we will continue. I mean, that's with DOT even being willing to study more than one alternative, that's one of the benefits is that we can, continue to push them not only to look at the three alternatives, but, continue to remind them, are there any others out there, and, what else is out there? and again, none of this study, just because the study's being done and we look at these, doesn't mean that the grade separation will ever actually.
Right, we could do that too. But I mean, when you're dealing with a group that thinks it's perfectly reasonable in like 4 places in the state to have 2 lanes of interstate going in one direction and only 1 lane going in the other, then, I think pushing them to come up with something different is probably, a good thing.
Yeah.
Well, then I would take a little bit of exception when we were talking about the town center plan. I don't think we were kicking the can down the road. I don't think we were postponing it. It was just totally off the table. It was infeasible. Nobody even thought about that. I remember a brief discussion, and I think it was probably Ben Hitchings said, oh, gee, to do a grade separation, you'd have to start the hill round about Town Hall. And it was just off the table. It wasn't even considered. So
I certainly didn't mean to say that it was kicked down the road. I just, it had always been envisioned to, really be off the table. But,
yes.
Things have changed quite a bit since
they have.
2007, 2009 timeframe.
I mean, the town center's plan, it was a very purposeful decision not to have an overpass.
Right.
In the middle of the historic crossroads village district.
You
is the nice word here. But so you're right. I mean, as I alluded to earlier, why does McCrimmon set up so great? Because we designed McCrimmon to have the overpass. That's the reason where overpass does not involve purchasing a brand new sheets.
Right.
It was very thoughtful.
And I know we had to fight hard to get sheets to conform with that. So.
Yeah. Where the flip side is, this was designed to be the town center, not to have an overpass.
Right.
Yeah.
So basically, I mean, we're talking about putting the Great Wall of China through our historic crossroads. And I'm just horrified by the whole idea. So
yeah, I mean, hopefully not.
And I know you're only the messenger.
And this is, I will say, this is one of the reasons why, when DOT first started talking about these back in June, was the first time that they had really mentioned, this possibility to town staff. This is why we said back in June, put the brakes on. We've got to go to council, because there hasn't been a lot of discussion at council or with you or any of the town about a grade separation here in many, many years. And previous plans and policies have clearly said, no grade separation, we'll deal with it other ways. And so when DOT came back and said, we think we need a grade separation now, we as staff said, okay, we got to go talk to town council and you and certainly, want to at least have some very detailed studies done before we move forward on anything.
Great. And that goes back to my previous point. I'm so pleased that you're now plugged in, because the other thing that cut the town in half was I-540. And I remember we tried to even get a little minimum tunnel under 540 so that we could connect Shiloh to Shiloh, and it was just off the table. So at least we're discussing things. It worries me, though, this wonderful statement, well, don't worry, we're just doing all this study, but you don't need to approve it. Well, then, let's not pay the money. It's my taxpayers' money that's going into these studies. So the study will gradually get more and more legitimate, and it'll be a plan before we know it. So I'm really concerned about that.
Yeah, and again,
I have some other points to make. So, the traffic should be oriented towards Morrisville Parkway, which is grade separated already. Should be oriented towards McCrimmon. Put the money in the grade separation at McCrimmon. Put the money into the grade separation at Airport, and leave our historic crossroads alone. When I-540 initially opened from 54 to 55, it was free. The morning that it opened, I remember driving down Morrisville Carpenter and crossing the railroad and crossing 54, and it was a dream. And it seemed to me, it wasn't objective data, but it seemed to me that, wow, that's great. A lot of the people from Northwest Cary who are driving through Morrisville to get to wherever are taking 540. So another solution is to take the damn toll off 540 between 54 and 55, like it was.
It's in about 40 years.
Let's think about alternatives to this. It worries me to death that we're widening Morrisville Carpenter. we're widening aviation, we're improving aviation at 40, probably taking a lot of green space away at that intersection. And that's going to create demand, and then the demand will go to the bottleneck, which will be the 54, and they'll look for grade separation. So all of these are linear. There's more traffic, so we've got to have more lanes. More lanes brings more traffic, so we've got to have more lanes. It's a circle. And we saw that in many places. California was one example. They kept extending the freeway, and people lived further and further away to use the freeway. So I just despair. This is a direct assault on our historic crossroads that we've tried very hard to preserve.
And to his point about the toll, but if you move the toll, you can also they drive back on the 540 exit path. But now you also have a piece of that.
Now you're talking.
Well, if y'all can talk DOT and the Turnpike Authority into remove any of that toll, go for it.
That ain't happening.
Well, we won't remove it. We'll just move it from 540 to Morrisville Carpenter.
Yeah.
Just kick it down the road.
Yeah.
I say we put a toll on Morrisville Carpenter,
Good idea.
unless you're local.
You're penalizing poor people like me. I mean,
Now you're talking.
Well, I will say to your point, Peter, about the widening of the roads. I agree. I mean, as I think we've all learned, you can't widen the roads to get rid of all the problems, because the more you widen the roads, the more traffic's going to come. In this area, especially, there's been information shown that 54 needs to be 6 lanes or 8 lanes. We know we don't want that, and so even while yes we are widening the roads, most of the widening that we're doing now is to handle the traffic problems that we already have, and in a lot of cases it may not handle some of the future growth of traffic if all that growth of traffic comes like the model shows. So we're at this point, a lot of our widenings are just trying to catch up from the last 20 years, and unfortunately, we can do a lot more transit, push a lot more multimodal, but the cars are still going to be on the road for a lot of it, and so we need the widening now to try and catch up. We want to try and do it smartly. We want to try and still push for the multimodal options, push for transit, continue to invest in that, but we need we do need the widening today. The other thing is looking ahead for the town and for our tax revenue base and everything. If we don't get some of this investment in our roads, then it's going to be a lot more harder for the town to sustain itself in the future as we get closer and closer to build out. Or we may not reach build out because people stop coming here because they can't get around. So it is a little bit of a catch-22. So we're trying our best. And then the other thing is, so much of our stuff is DOT controlled that we have a voice, but at the same time it's only a voice, it's not control. So
Okay, we'll leave it at that. Thank you, Ben. Great marathon. Thank you very much. So we have the opportunity for public comment. Anybody wishes to make public comment? We'll close the public comment session. And then we vault ahead, courtesy of our new agenda system, right to number 9. Courtney.
Oh, that would be me. Mine's easy after the overpass discussion. I think my head kind of exploded. I don't know which one when I saw a lot of those. And I certainly started shooting out alternatives that I thought were virtually much better than what the engineers had designed, and I'm not an engineer. So I'm not sure mine were truly much better. What I have is our monthly newsletter, as always. Some of the key, I'm going to make it a little bit bigger so I can see it. Some of the key new projects. Villas of Sunset, as well as the Charlotte Animal Hospital. Both of those new projects have been submitted. And the Perimeter Park, I'm sure you've read in the paper about IOC, how it's coming to Morrisville, how IOC is merged with another firm. well, to handle that merger, the building needs to get larger. There's been an article in the Triangle Business Journal about that. So they're adding an additional level to their parking deck and expanding the building footprint. The only approval we had this month with a co-location for a cell tower, and council did approve of that annexation for Myers Point Towns. My little bit of employee spotlight. Carrie is now officially certified as a zoning official in North Carolina. It's approximately about 4 weeks of classes that you take.
So she gets
of
awarded a Prius by the planning department, is it?
Well, so she's now on that, and and so it's official now for her. One little thing that I don't have in here, but it has to do with the department reorganization. As you're aware, probably about a year ago, we created 3 distinct divisions within the department: long range, which Ben oversees; current, that Michelle oversees; and GIS, which Rodney oversees. Underneath that, we've been shifting people around. Marty has officially shifted to current planning, so she's going to be taking on a lot of those roles and helping out in that department. We should have a new GIS intern here shortly in the next couple of weeks that will be helping on a sidewalk inventory project for us, and we start interviewing for a new transportation planner next week. So, depending on how that goes, it can be anywhere from 6 to 12 weeks before somebody would start, but hopefully we'll be filling that role sooner rather than later. The only other update that I want to give you, and it didn't occur within the July timeframe, it just was voted on at the meeting this week in front of Town Council, but the rezoning case on Aviation and Evans that y'all forwarded a recommendation of denial. It was a general rezoning case. It went to council as a general rezoning case. The applicant cannot just decide to convert an application from general to conditional, but they can change it to respond to specific requests via the Planning and Zoning Board or Town Council. So they ended up modifying the project and adding some restricted uses and capped the number of residential units. So if they were to build multifamily, it's capped. And then it was approved at the last council meeting at a vote of 5-2. So I just wanted to give you a quick update on that. Since it's very rarely that something leaves this board without resolving itself prior to going to council based off y'all's feedback and comments along the way. So just want to give you a quick update on that.
The only exclusion I could remember was they're not going to build a bus station.
There's 3 of them. I can look it up, but I can even include it. It was a bus station.
It was about that level.
Transit.
Yeah.
So there's some transit-related ones that were prohibited in that conditional IN district. They carried some of those forward and then capped at 300 units.
Yeah, I mean, things that you wouldn't imagine them doing anyway, so it's like...
Yeah. I will only confirm what you are stating.
They gave us the sleeves off their jacket, which they didn't have anyway. That's the old expression.
Could I have a question?
Sure.
Getting back to the world famous Freedom of Information Act. So do we copy Marty now or copy you? It's my understanding anytime we send an email about anything because of the Freedom of Information Act, we're required to copy the town staff member. That's as part of our regulation, we're required to do that. So my question is, do I copy Marty or do I copy you?
If you send it just to Marty, Marty will forward it on to me. But you're welcome to copy both of us if it's of higher importance and I just need to see it. So for example, if you send her an email right before the meeting and I may need to gather some information, it's helpful to copy me in those instances. But a lot of times people just notify her if they're out or something along those lines. If you send it to the entire Planning and Zoning Board and you use that email address, I will get it that way as well, just depending on what you do. But the general rule, Marty is your point of contact. But if you want me to sooner rather than later, you can copy me.
Got it. Thank you.
Any other questions for Courtney?
So it was capped at 300 units. How many units are across the road?
300.
Which is what I think one of our main reservations was about. Was it 300
Second,
across
and
the
I will
road?
pull up the case file, and I can answer it for you. Just 1 minute.
Looks like a 300 unit.
I want to say it's in. We have some that are right under 300, and we have some that are right under 200, and we have another one that's over 300. But I can't necessarily differentiate between which one's which. So give me 1 minute, and I will answer your question.
I think it
So they
was
essentially got what they wanted to anyway. Yeah.
They were approved for a request very similar to what their original request was.
At least we forced some discussion.
Pardon?
At least we forced some discussion.
When we see that project go off across the left-hand side of the road there, we can go, well, at least we made them talk.
We can say we told you so.
We told you so.
Let's see here. Lake Crabtree Apartments, and I apologize, how it appears in here is very cryptic looking. It has 200 units. So what's across the street is 200 units on 9.55 acres. Perspective, the station, which is under construction at Park West, is 189 units on 10.59 acres. And then there's the Shiloh Resident project that's up near Walmart. That's 318 units, but that's on close to 50 acres. So they all have different densities depending on the volume of land that they have. And so this one was capped at 300 units for this project. If I remember correctly, let me tell you how many acres it is really fast. Just give me 1 minute to switch screens here. I'm looking for the answer quickly, and of course I'm not finding it. It's 15 acres. So if I would have quoted you off the top of my head, I've been off by 3. And to answer the question about the conditions, they are prohibiting a bus station, a central utility plant, a transit station, and a major utility facility. And of course, the cap at 300 units.
A quick question on your planning letter. Where is Sunset Villas?
Sunset Villas is located on Cotton Place. There's some parcels.
Okay.
Sunset Drive heading south.
Right.
They're just being built, right?
Well, it has to go through the review and approval process.
I mean, I saw a
to
sign
create the
up.
lots. No, the sign that you see is located on Clement, on Aviation.
Oh, okay.
That you see, those, it was, the lots were created through the exempt subdivision process. So they're exempt under statute, how the lots are created, and those are just going to be pulling building permits really to build those.
Right. Planning board comments. Lee.
No.
Esther. Craig.
No, I'm just didn't get a clear answer on the Prius question, but I'll sure see Carrie and remind her that she should get a free Prius now that she's officially part of it.
Well, she has a Prius.
Oh, it's okay.
It's not new.
Okay. Okay.
You know, I'm still waiting for my award to get converted to Model S.
Point taken. Point
I'm
taken.
still working on that. It costs more than my annual salary.
Point taken. Point taken.
Girl can dream now.
That's right. You're good.
Harleen,
I'm good.
Rex, last opportunity.
No, I'm good.
Okay,
We're gonna-
all right. The only comment I was going to make was it's interesting to see some progress on the town centre demo project and the RFP. So, fortunately, the new town centre will be a long way from the historic crossroads. So,
It may or may not be, so we're finalizing the RFP for our land use plan update. And as part of that, is because the demonstration project's a little bit different than what was in the town center plan. It's actually going back and taking a closer look at what we have out there. So that is going to be part of the next big project that's going to kick off before, for about the same time yours is adopted, that one will kick off for a land use plan update for the next 18 months. But it is part of that, so there'll be more time to talk about our below town center.
okay. All right. Thank you, Courtney. I'd just like to close by thanking Rex for your service.
Thank you. I appreciate being here.
Very good. And we've jumped, I think, now to item number upcoming events. Well, we can look for those ourselves, right? Nobody's expiring this month, apart from Rex. Number 13, adjournments.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second motion.
There you go. Good. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you.
See, I did.